Hello, welcome. My name is Teresa Moon. I'm Director of Business Development and Marketing for Parabilis. And we are proud to have you join us for what we are calling Frequently Asked Questions series that we're going to build on so that we can help small and growing government contractors really understand the ins and outs of that funding process. And so we wanted to make sure that we provided you with basic information that we build on each time, so that the process isn't intimidating and it provides you with what you need so you feel a little bit more comfortable with having some of those uncomfortable conversations as it pertains to access to capital for your business.
Yeah, we know that talking about finance is everybody's favorite subject as a small business owner, which goes into who I am. I'm Kim Bode. I'm the owner of 834 Integrated Communications. We have been, friends or partners with Parabilis for over a year now. One of the reasons I wanted to be able to jump in and kind of give a small business perspective, and then be able to kind of ask Teresa questions that are relevant to, like when you're navigating the process, because it's confusing and it's just scary and you just feel it's just uncomfortable. So today we're going to talk about becoming a client, and we're going to talk funding fundamentals. And also please stay tuned till the end, where we'll have additional resources that you can download, or, we'll reference different things that you can, that are going to help you in your journey. So I want to start out, Teresa, just talking about like the typical problems. Like when somebody comes to Parabilis, how do they come to you, and what are some of the first things they ask you?
It's usually in several different ways, which is great because it allows us the opportunity to really reach the community where they are. And that's, I think, the most important aspect of how we service our clients, from that serve first mentality. The majority of the time that we're interacting with businesses, or we meet them at an event, they hear us talk about what the difficulties are within the community to access the capital that they need. And they come to us with multiple issues. The banking environment that we find ourselves in these days is particularly difficult for small, minority owned, that growing base. They find that hardship from day one through even year 5.
Yeah.
Businesses that can make it over that 5th year hurdle tend to be more successful in the marketplace than that interim between. And so when we meet them initially, they are typically unable to obtain, keep, or increase a line of credit that they already have with their bank. So this is not to knock banks. That's not what any of this is about. We partner with banks every single day. It's a very important aspect of doing business. However, the nature of it and the truth of the matter is it's still very difficult for a small and growing business to get not just what they need, but what they need to continue to grow. And a little bit of perspective, my background is in business development and capture teams for small growing contractors. And one of my first responsibilities was, here are all of our NAICS codes, go out and find as many opportunities as you can that fit within that realm. And while I was very new to the process, I was very successful at doing just that because of the relationship building and strategic partnership nurturing that I've really leaned myself into throughout my professional career. So when I brought back what I had won, all excited like a puppy dog, did I do a good job? It was not only did you do a great job, but now we're at a functional disadvantage because we don't know how we're going to fund it. So 2 problems lie there, right? The business development process didn't include recognition of whether or not the funding capability would be there if those awards were won. And then the other side of it is what to do once you realize that that is the crux of your problem. So it's starting that process earlier in your business development plan, having those conversations from an executive level down and really being honest about it. You don't have to tell your BD team how much money you have in the bank, but you do need to chart out what the costs would be incurred should you be awarded those opportunities. And then looking at your pipeline further to see if we win any additional, what other burden will that bring to what we're currently dealing with from a cash flow perspective. So the bank is the least of your problems. It's always going to be your cheapest form of capital, even with interest rates the way that they are now. But being able to see that there are other viable options that the bank can lead you to that can either fit for the interim, or it might be a long-term plan based off of the industry you're in. So there's a lot of nuances that come into play there. We typically see on the onset of a contract that the client or prospective client is needing cash for payroll, right? Payroll is your greatest expense as a business owner. It takes up about 80% of the money that you have in your bank account to pay your payroll each time. Higher operating expenses, those happen on the onsets of any type of contract. You might have to hire people, you might have to buy new equipment, the purchasing from suppliers. So all of those types of growth challenges lead them to, if my bank says no, then now what?
It's interesting too, because when you were talking about small businesses, I read a statistic the other day, 40% of small businesses fail before they hit the 10-year mark. And I think that's really interesting because I remember getting congratulated, like, oh, 5 years, you've made it. And I was like, no, I haven't. I mean, I'm 17, 18 years in, and I still don't feel like I've made it. You know, you still have that worry and that concern. And the biggest part of that is finance. It's the financial aspect of it. You're constantly, constantly worried about it. And I want to point out, I want to really call attention to one of the things you said, like as the business development person, when you were working capture and you brought all these opportunities, you're not alone if you also haven't thought that far ahead, because you're like, well, I'll figure it out once I get it. But then once you get it, you've got to immediately tool up, and like government's not going to be patient with that. So you've got to be ready to go. How soon would you want somebody to come to you to start talking to you?
Right. To your point, that's the biggest unifier. When people are sitting in a room listening to us talk about what we do at Parabilis, the need for access to cash infusions for your business is the number one need of all businesses, of all sizes, of all industries. So it is something that if we kind of let down our hair about it and stop being so insecure about what we don't know, that's where you could really share and get to the meat and potatoes of how to get over that hurdle, right? To your point, getting to 10 years is a huge feat. And the reason that most businesses fail way before that is because they don't have the money to keep it going. And so when we see people coming to us, the ways that we provide them with an access that makes sense for what GovCon specifically, with what federal contractors specifically need, is that it's a customizable line of credit. We don't have a talk track that our internal team provides you with when you move from me to becoming a client. We have steps of processes that are in place to really find out what you do, what your needs are now, tracking for you what cash flow is going to look like in the near and far future, so that we're really teaching you along the way how to manage that financial side of it for you. Because although you may have to outsource a lot of that portion of your business, right, to an accountant, to a CFO, to a lending organization like Parabilis, you still have to be in charge of it. So if you're not learning along the way or working with partners that allow you to understand it before they move you forward, then you're at a disadvantage. Because if our CEO, Bruce Lyman, says all the time, as a business owner, if you don't know where your money is, then you don't know how successful you're doing, or you don't know that it's time to pivot. And so even though you might hire well to outsource that portion of your business, you still have to be on top of it. So you have to be involved in those conversations all the time so that you can be asking questions that will lead to the next best step. And so that customizable line of credit and the process that it takes to get there is super important, because we're not trying to jam a square peg into a round hole. We find out very quickly in our process whether or not you are a good fit. We're going to service you no matter what. We're going to talk to you no matter what. But if you're not a good fit, we're not going to keep you on a string, because time is of the essence when it pertains to your federal contracts endeavor. And to your point earlier, the government isn't going to say, oh, okay, we'll give you time to figure it out. It's going to affect your past performance score, which in turn is going to affect your ability to bid another day, right? So the key that differentiates us the most from our partners in the banking industry is not the line of credit aspect, because that's something that is very traditional in terms of what you can understand, right? Our line of credit is set up similar to a bank. However, we have 3 different access points. For a government contractor, typically, if you're working with a bank, your accounts receivable are your collateral. They are what they look at. They are the differentiator of whether or not you qualify for the cash that they can give you or not. So you too can utilize your accounts receivable, your AR, your invoices to access the line of credit. So we are looking at that as well, but it's not a deciding factor for us. We also are allowing you to utilize your work in progress, which is great for the businesses that really need that upfront cash to get going and utilize money that they are earning, but they haven't yet been paid, because AR only hits after the fact, which isn't helpful on the onset of a contract, right? And so the bank is not going to be able to provide you with work in progress cash up front. Our line of credit does provide that access point. And then the third point is only for resellers of goods. It's utilizing those delivery orders. So if you are a reseller, you usually get a delivery order calendar, if you will, in your contract award, and you can utilize the entire value of that actual contract at a certain percentage to pull that cash forward to pay your suppliers. So if that's something that you circulate with the work that you do, you'd have that option to do so as well. And I think that's the biggest differentiator, is the different access points to get it in, and then the ability to manage that through the use of multiple contracts. So you're not just beholden to one. As you build and grow your contract award base, you're able to utilize that. We refer to as a revolving line of credit, because it's a rinse and repeat process through the usage of multiple contracts simultaneously.
I also want to say too, like, you know, as a small business owner, I know what it can seem overwhelming, like everything we're kind of talking about. I think the thing that mattered most to me with Parabilis is how approachable everyone was, how personable everyone was, and that there were no dumb questions. Because there are no dumb questions. I mean, we're going to ask dumb questions, but they're never going to tell you they're dumb questions. And I think that's important. Like, ask the question if you don't understand, because you said something earlier where you don't have to be necessarily involved in the day-to-day as it relates to the finances, but you need to know the story they're telling you, and you absolutely need to be aware of where you stand. Because you can't have these conversations with a funding source or, you know, a bank or, you know, someone like Parabilis unless you know that. And yeah. I want to talk about the mistakes some small business owners have made. And I will preface this with, I did this. And it's not utilizing or using, you know, a company like Parabilis that is like, you know, trustworthy and, you know, is open and honest and transparent, and, you know, also is not going to do anything shady, because that's not them. Their reputation speaks for themselves. But there are multiple other companies that are out there. And I want you to talk a little bit about like what to look for. If you're a small business owner, what do you need to be aware of? And what are some red flags?
Right. I think the greatest part about what I do and being able to wake up every morning and love what I do day in and day out is because of who I work with and who I work for. We are proudly veteran owned and operated. So there's right there that instance of security and doing the right thing, serving first. We have a servant mentality throughout every level of our leadership, all the way down to the newest employees, in really doing what's best for the business in front of us for what they need, not what we need for them to need today from us. And so really being able to address what your needs are preeminently today, and not have it be something that we're trying to force you down, you know, a sales cycle with Parabilis, because that's not what's important to you. And so really getting to know the business, why you do what you do, what's the passion behind it. It is how our underwriting system is different than a traditional banking environment or even from other alternatives. We want to know why you're passionate about what you do, so we can advocate on behalf of you of why, if what we can provide to you will help you grow. So even if that's outside of the four walls of Parabilis, that's fine. None of us are beholden to just talking to you as it pertains to whether or not you can work with us. It's really giving you what you need so that you make it past those milestones that most businesses don't have the luxury of being able to do. And so what we find a lot of is people don't have the conversation early enough. Some of the most candid and vulnerable and amazing discussions that I have with business owners are the ones that really aren't ready yet. They're pre-award, pre-first award, they're brand new, or they've had small awards, they've been involved in simplified acquisitions and things of that nature, but they're not making any payrolls yet. They're really bootstrapping it. Those are the best conversations, because they are less likely to be withholding information because they're embarrassed about what their status is. They're really on that educational path of teach me what I need to know so that I'm knowledgeable about what the process looks going forward. And I think the majority of businesses that make mistakes or stumble along the way, it's not because they're not smart. It's because they're just so unaware of what they don't know, because they were afraid to have those candid conversations, because they were not wanting to indulge or offer up any of the financial missteps that they've had in the past. And so a lot of that's tied personally, right?
Mhm.
We all we've all been kids with credit cards. We've all gotten involved in debt that we don't want to admit to. And I think that that's the biggest deficit. You don't have to divulge your personal journey. You just have to look at it from a strategic perspective of, what do I need today and how do I get there? And we can give you step by step of, you may not be ready for us today, but here's what we're going to be looking for. And so a lot of different alternatives to bank financing. Bank financing is very cut and dry, very black and white. There are no gray areas. You pretty much know what to expect when you walk in. But a lot of it has to do with financial past performance. Government contractors are very aware of what past performance means from a professional standpoint, capability standpoint, and racking those up is what gets you those next opportunities. The same applies in finance, right? You have to be able to provide some proof of financial past performance in order to get lending from the majority of all lending institutions, because there's nothing to underwrite with. If you've never run a payroll, if you don't have any, accounts receivable aging reports to show what money is filtering through your business, there's nothing for them to work with you. So it's very important to start documenting, even if you're doing it yourself from day one. I always recommend CPA on day one is essential, especially one that's knowledgeable of GovCon. However, that financial past performance piece is key, because if you skip over that, you might be ready and able to get some type of funding, but you have nothing to give to an underwriting team to push you through the rest of the process. And so I think that that's probably the biggest misstep, is that they bootstrap it for so long that they really don't keep any record of where they've been financially.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I like that. Another thing I want to talk a little bit about too are the additional resources. So you talked, you said like, maybe you're not ready for your funding journey with Parabilis yet, but there are other things. You are so connected within the industry, and I really want to emphasize that, because you have been working within this industry for so long. You know the key players. You have them on speed dial. I think it's important for people to really tune in, and whether it's seeing you in person at a conference or it's tuning into the podcast, Spilling the Tea, which we'll put a link to that after we're done wrapping this up. But you're constantly interviewing resources. You're constantly talking about it. And I think as a small business owner, I remember thinking like, isn't there like a handbook for this? Can somebody have given me like a roadmap? And the answer to that is no. You are literally on your own. You have to surround yourself with the right people. And Parabilis is the right company to surround yourself with. And then, Teresa is gonna get you those connections you need, and is always going to be willing to do some outreach or find what you need for the next step in your journey. You just can't be afraid to ask. And getting involved in this community is probably one of the best things I ever did. And I think that's really important too, that making the time to really grow those relationships is key. So I want to talk a little bit, because there are other types of funding sources out there. I want you to maybe share like what they could be and why they would be maybe not ideal.
Right. So the good news is there are a lot. It isn't just us in the bank, right? And so you can find the best fit for yourself. And I think part of the beauty of what I get to do for Parabilis is be able to provide an avenue to an ecosystem of vetted resources within the GovCon community that are trusted, they're very well established, and they're people that you can research on your own after that recommendation to really find out for yourself. Because most people will get really defeated when they've been referred to me and we establish very quickly that this might not be a good fit for us. While we'd love to help everyone, right? It's still, there are certain nuances that make it that it isn't just a good fit for us yet. And so what I do on a day-to-day basis is form these strategic partnerships with other people within our own industry, and then other resource providers within GovCon in general that I can refer you to that is going to meet the need that you have today. So, I do have vetted internal financial resources that if it isn't a good fit for Parabilis, that I can set you up with a couple of different recommendations of people who might be able to assist on the lending aspect of things. But with regard to outside of that, it could be that I'm referring you to an accountant. I'm referring you to legal counsel. I'm referring you to an organization that supports a certification you already have
Yeah.
or that you're looking to obtain, or really getting yourself involved in a community that can provide you with different teaming options or joint venture opportunities, mentor protege partnerships that are really going to allow you to immerse yourself with people who know what they're doing and have already charted that course and might be able to share their experience with you. So with that being said, being involved in the financial community for the years that I have been now, I found really quickly that we're not all the way. And that is a good and a bad thing because you need to have options within it. But there are options that have become prevalent in the GovCon community because of the fast hit or the easy access that people find that very attractive because they've waited too long in their BD process to find what they actually need for their funding capability. But they move too quick because they are afraid that they won't be able to meet that payroll, or they're afraid they won't be able to pay their supplier. So they get in bed with a company that has been less than diligent on making sure that you know all the small print in what their agreements are. And, when we were established in the marketplace in 2013, it was really to bridge the gap between traditional lending at a bank and then the other side of it that was predominantly at that time invoice factoring. But farther to the right on that spectrum is merchant cash advance. And I have to say, you never talk negatively about anyone that's within the same industry because there's no need for it. And there are plenty of merchant cash advance companies that espouse to do it the right way. They've found a formula that might actually work. But the thing that they can't dispel about the way that their process works is the fact that it's very expensive.
Very
it can
expensive.
be triple digit interest rates on something that keeps rolling over. And then you become stuck in a domino effect of other businesses coming after you to buy out that cash advance and put you into theirs. And so merchant cash advance in a nutshell is if you are receiving credit card payments or debit card payments for whatever services that you're providing, they utilize for future credit card sales based off of what you're doing today to not only chart what your interest rates will be in paying them back, but in your ability to borrow from them. But some of the underlying red flags that we see within that industry are being highlighted in a lot of litigation that's going on in a bunch of different states where these contracts that are signed, the borrower doesn't understand that they've limited themselves to really a course of action in the court of law to protect them when they've been overstepped, when they've been, given something at a rate that they can't pay back. And then they're litigated against without them even knowing it, that the judgment is being passed by the lender towards them in a judicial system that they've not even been involved in because they signed off on it. So this is, really disconcerting because the majority of the people who engage in this environment with merchant cash advance are not understanding from a very educated level of what it means. And they didn't have someone from a legal perspective look at the contract before, probably because they didn't have that type of support with their work. So for no other fault of just not knowing what they didn't know, they put themselves into an agreement that ultimately sets them up for failure. And it's really sad because there aren't many options that can help buy them out of that situation from a legal standpoint so that they can move into something that actually fits better. And so they find themselves in a really tough spot with being able to not only continue to receive the money from that company, but to keep up with the payments and to keep up with the interest that piles on top of them almost like quicksand. And so we highly advise that if you can find time in your BD schedule to look at what all of your options are before you win that contract award, pre-RFP, right? RFI would be great. You're putting in information for when the RFP drops. Those are great times to be going to your bank, finding out if they can do it for you. If they say yes or no, then you know where to go next, asking them to refer you to an alternative lender that they work with, particularly one that they have clients that you would be able to talk to ask them what their experience was with that alternative lender. So we get a lot of referrals from banks because the bank can say, yep, we weren't able to help this company. We referred them over to Parabilis, and you talk to Parabilis, and then we let you talk to those clients. And so they can tell you what their experience was with us, whether they're currently with us, whether they graduated on, or whether they've been able to, you know, what everyone's dream come true is, and not have to borrow any money at all and do it themselves. And so really getting someone else's experience to inform you on where might be the best next step for you, I think is key. And it's just, you need to know what to ask and who to ask, and really press for it before you make your decision.
Yeah, I wish I could talk to 2013 Kim Bode, and like literally right when, you know, Parabilis was being founded, I was getting one of those advances, and it was because I couldn't make payroll and they were going to fund me within 2 days. And it was the hardest thing I've ever dealt with business wise, because I was trapped, and you immediately have to start paying it back, and it immediately is way more than you borrowed. I mean, because the interest rate is insane. And like, if you don't make one of those payments, like the penalties are like awful. Like, I just remember feeling like, you know, I borrowed from the mob. Like, that's what it felt like. You know, I was like, I'm going to get my legs broke next. I don't know, but it is, it's just, and I was embarrassed to ask for help. I didn't have a relationship with my bank. I had no idea, you know, where to go. And so I just Googled it, which that's never the way to find a resource, you know, a trusted resource. And then I was trapped. And I think it was probably 1.5 years to get out of it. And a lot of small businesses don't. It's like, they have to file bankruptcy. They have to walk away. They have to shut their doors. And we don't, you know, we don't ever want you to be in that position. And I mean, so take this as like, you know, learn from me, learn from, you know, like Parabilis, and like start thinking about it much sooner than the day before you need that money. So
yeah. And it's funny that not funny, but ironic the way that you put it too. A lot of companies engage in that process because they need to make payroll. And that's the biggest burden of a business owner, is that not only is their business supporting their livelihood and their family, but it's also supporting the livelihood and families of all the people that they employ. And so a lot of times when people are in difficult situations like that, they end up making a decision with their hair on fire, because they're trying to do what's best for the people who actually are executing at the ground level of what their business capability is. And so it's very hard to watch that, but great news is there are options that can roll you out of that. We are happy to consult, whether you come on board with us or not, to help you find a way out of that. There's never a dead end with coming to our company, because we can consult with you on all the needs of your entire life cycle for your GovCon, because everyone at our company, from leadership all the way down, has experience with what the ebb and flow of GovCon contracts look like, and what the experience can be on the highs and lows. Because you can go on a award streak and then hit a, you know, government shutdown or continued resolution, and that can be daunting. And so you really have to have a lender that actually understands GovCon, so that you can move on to that next level without being able to, you know, pigeonhole you as someone that's not going to be able to pay that back. And so you just have to watch your business crumble around you, because they didn't want to provide you with someone else because they were too worried about what was going to be coming out of their portfolio. And we're not worried about that. I started with the company under the mindset that I was given from leadership, that we can all do well if we start by doing good. And that's true. And so I don't ever have to disparage anyone else in my industry. As a matter of fact, I do a lot of referring to other businesses that do something similar, but just help at different points of entry than we do. And, you know, a lot of times people don't recognize that I actually am with Parabilis too, because they'll get referred back to me if they need any other facet of their business and a referral of it. And they think that that's what I do. And I love to say that I'm a professional connector. I don't have to worry about doing anything but making friends and finding out what people do and what they love, so that I can make a possible connection that can help a business grow.
I think I want to point out too, before we wrap this up, you know, Bruce, the CEO, is also was a small business owner. And I think, you know, as a small business owner, like that makes me feel better. Or I guess, you know, I'm like, you understand that journey. You understand how terrifying it is. You understand how scary it is. And like, you're not going to look down on me for some of the choices I've made or some of the mistakes I've made. And I think, you know, that's to me, that's a really great partner, you know? And so the whole point of us doing this series around funding and funding fundamentals is really to ensure that you are planning ahead, because as a small business owner, you should always plan for the worst and hope for the best. And a big part of that is always tied back to finance. It's always tied back to finance. You have to plan for a government shutdown because it's going to happen inevitably at some point. You know, there's great blogs on the Parabilis website, parabilis.com, that specifically addresses that, and how to prepare, you know. So I think, you know, Teresa, is there anything you want to kind of, you want to end with? I do want people to know that, you know, we'll post some information at the end of, you know, once we wrap up, that, you know, where you can submit questions for future series, or, you know, for us to address on other webinars, as well as, you know, to download for different resources.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity of being able to break it down a little bit better. And like you said, this is the introduction to a series that we're going to be providing the community with. I think we refer to ourselves internally as compassionate lenders. And when you say that externally, people laugh sometimes, but it really is true. We are a customer service focused environment where our leadership really cares, because they've walked in your shoes in more ways than one. And it isn't an oddity for the CEO and the president to give you a call while you're in process with us to find out how things are going. And it is embedded in our processes that you are given a client advising team that is made up of treasury analysts and credit analysts and a client advisor that can walk you through all the facets of your business, not just the finance side. So it's a very knowledgeable team of really being able to support you, not only providing you with our access to our ecosystem of vetted resources, but being able to provide you the support you need from a financial side so that you get to that financial stability that you came to us looking for help with. And so, you know, there are nuances that we need. We're not a great fit for everyone, but we will help you get on the right track, whether you become a client or not.
And, you know, I can speak for the level of service, and compassionate lender is a really great way to describe yourself. And the fact is like, if other people vouch for, you know, someone like Parabilis and Teresa, then, you know, this is it's a big community, but it's not, it's like a small community. So like, you know, I think once you start, you know, now you're going to hear the Parabilis name forever and ever. And Teresa, it's going to pop up all over. Like, you know, once you've heard it, you'll never stop hearing it. So that's a really good sign. But, you know, we're just happy that you joined us to talk about this. And, you know, a big part of the reason I was here was to talk about, like, I did make those mistakes. I made a lot of those mistakes. And I'll probably make more of those mistakes in the future, but you have to surround yourself with the right advisors and partners. And Parabilis is one of those.
Awesome. I can't agree more. If you need assistance, we are a great team of professionals that can help.